I want to introduce Attorney John Burns, who's in Washington, D.C. And, John, before we get started, I want to show our viewers just a live picture from Boston tonight. There's also a confrontation in the streets of Boston where there are protesters. Protesters have been out all night. Looks like they have surrounded a car there, and police are out in force near Boston Common. John, let me get your reaction to what you're seeing on the second night of the sort of the response to what the grand jury did in New York.
No, I think people are upset. People are outraged. People are calling for action. I think it's really compelling to see diversity of races and cultures and political affiliations. I think everybody's really outraged with that decision of no indictment in the Eric Garner case, and they're making their voices heard.
Now, what does this accomplish, though?
I think it accomplishes a number of different things. I think over the history of our country, we've seen that action in terms of unified action can really institute change, and I think you've already seen it happening. Obviously, the mayor came out today and said he's going to retrain the police force, so I think that's a first step in ultimately having more substantial change over time. The
very police force that's going to be retrained is out in the streets of the city of New York tonight dealing with protesters. What do they need to know? What needs to be retrained about those officers?
Well, I think you look at what the mayor proposed. He's a very comprehensive proposal in terms of their communication, their problem solving, their dealing with communities of color, their ability to be sensitive to racial and gender biases. I think it's a number of different things. And obviously, it's not going to be an overhaul of their training. It's not a comprehensive overhaul. It's only a 3-day training regimen. I think it's really important. And I think the mayor really correctly acknowledged that a problem exists. And I think the commissioner did the same. And I think that's very telling. I think it's a big step for them both to acknowledge a problem, and based upon what they said, they're committing to make appropriate steps forward to make and correct these wrongs.
Other than retraining, what else needs to change?
I think what is going to be the biggest hurdle for the New York Police Department and police departments across the country is to reconcile this mistrust that communities of color have with the police department. This has been ingrained over generations, so it's going to take time. But I applaud the mayor's efforts in taking some of the early steps to ultimately rectify that wrong.
John, stand by for just a second. I want to talk about another story with you in a moment. But first, the police in another major American city will soon be under a court-appointed monitor.